Hello Legionnaires, this is Max Liao from Legion Myth, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Swordmaster discipline in the Earthdawn role-playing game. If you've not watched my earlier video titled Earthdawn Disciplines and Adepts an Overview, I suggest you take a look at that episode as it explains the nuances of what it means to be an adept who follows a discipline in the Earthdawn role-playing game. I'll post a link to that video in the description below. In regard to this particular episode on the Swordmaster, as well as future discipline-specific episodes, I will be discussing the Swordmaster discipline primarily in terms of 4th edition Earth. 4th edition is the most recent version of the game, and thus the most appropriate version to discuss. Where 4th edition information is lacking or where comparisons need to be made, I'll revert to previous editions as needed, and mention the appropriate version if necessary. Please understand I will not be indicating or identifying every single change made to the Earthdawn game, or to the Swordmaster discipline. However, I will point out any major changes that could affect such information. Luckily, unlike some other disciplines, such as the Thief, the Swordmaster really has not changed terribly much across the editions. So with that out of the way, I hope you have your blade in hand, unsheath your wit, and are ready to dance. So let's start with the background and worldview of the Swordmaster. So what is the Earthdawn Swordmaster? I mean, right off the bat, we can pretty much be assured that it's someone who wields a sword, right? And probably wields it pretty well. But can't the warrior do the same thing? So what separates a Swordmaster Adept from a warrior adept or some lady who spends years of training with a blade? First and foremost, skill with the blade is only half of what it means to be a Swordmaster. Skill with wit is the other half. A Swordmaster is the virtuoso of wit and weapon. Both are dancing partners, a harmony where one without the other is empty, lacking, and plain. Battle is an art, and the Swordmaster practices it with joy. Clever catchphrases, witty insults, and humorous asides are as natural to the Swordmaster as their elegant embellishments on the art of swordplay. The philosophy of the Swordmaster teaches that swords are more truly a weapon of wit than of war. Words are a weapon of all Swordmasters. And in a verbal exchange, the Swordmaster has all the same maneuvers that he has in a sword. I assure you, a Swordmaster's words can cut as sharply as any sword. Where a warrior seeks honor and victory, a Swordmaster seeks perfection and glory. A Swordmaster does not focus on defeating the enemy. Instead, the act of fighting itself is the way in which a Swordmaster embodies the discipline. How an action is accomplished is at least as important as the result of an action. As such, Swordmasters trade not in killing, but in theater. The spectacle, the spotlight on perfection of form. Understand, the Swordmaster discipline is not an easy path to follow or trail to blaze. Many desire to follow the discipline, but few have what it truly takes to do so. Long, hard, dusty, sweaty hours of labor are just as much part of the Swordmaster's life as velvety words and leaping glory. The goal of any Swordmaster is perfection, and perfection can only be achieved with countless hours of training. Swordmasters form bonds with their weapon. They are an extension of each other. The Swordmaster is as much part of the weapon as the weapon is part of the Swordmaster. They are partners who dance together. Every stroke is a step in the dance, as well as a test of one's own blade work. Swordmasters are part performer, part combatant, and all show. No engagement, not one of swords or one of words should be boring. It's all part of the dance. To many Swordmasters, the mere spectacle of artfully drawing one sword is the single most dramatic event of the fight. And that's saying a lot when you witness a Swordmaster in action. Which leads me to tournaments and their importance. Tournaments must include a minimum of 9 participants and offer Swordmasters a number of different opportunities. Perhaps most importantly, tournaments provide a place where Swordmaster Adepts can meet with others who share their unique view of the world. Each tournament has its own particular traditions and customs. However, every tournament bestows bragging rights, which lasts until the next time that particular tournament is held. Bragging rights does not have to go to the champion or even to the winner, but to the single most memorable accomplishment. Bragging rights come with a certain amount of esteem and opportunity. The larger the tournament, the more prestigious the bragging rights. For the record, the Grand Tourney, held in midsummer just outside of Bartertown, is the most prestigious tournament. Lastly, and very briefly, a quick comment about Swordmaster's Soul Sword, the sword that is the Swordmaster's perfect complement, dancing partner. In my opinion, my vision of the Swordmaster, true perfection is an always just out of reach goal. A goal in which the Swordmaster continually strives but can never ultimately attain, which is why they train hard, and train even more again. In similar fashion, very few Swordmasters ever find their soul swords, and those who do only do so after truly heroic epic quests. A Swordmaster wielding a soul sword can perform astonishingly heroic feats. In game terms, this is reflected by spending an additional karma point each round on any action test using the sword. Alright, that was a quick background on what it means to be a Swordmaster Adept. So, what does it mean to be the Swordmaster's player? What should you expect if you choose Swordmaster as your character's discipline? Well, first of all, the Swordmaster isn't for everyone. If you're the strong silent type, or the type that just wants to execute a crushing blow every round, the Swordmaster may not be for you. Try the Warrior or Skyraider disciplines instead. If it wasn't stated well enough earlier, you're going to have to be prepared to combine social skills with your weapon attacks. So anyone looking to play a character who's proficient in both combat and social graces should really consider playing a Swordmaster. To be successful as a Swordmaster, one must engage in banter, showmanship, and performance combat. Swordmasters are all about the spectacular display. Some would say they are attention whores. They cannot help but to crave the attention or show off in grandiose displays. It is who they are. In terms of mechanics and talents, well, right off the bat, the Swordmaster knows the taunt talent, which reduces your opponent's ability to act and fight. A successful taunt followed up with an attack will be your bread and butter, especially at low circles. 4th edition even went so far as to hammer that point home as to provide the ability to spend karma on one's attack, the to-hit roll, versus a taunted opponent. Now, you don't get this until 11th circle, but the point is still clear. Keeping this in mind, the Swordmaster is best considered as a somewhat complex discipline that needs to set itself up for the proper attack. It's a pure 1 versus 1 duelist discipline that wins fights by controlling the enemy through its social skills, and following up those social attacks with weapon finesse. While certainly not weak per se, admittedly Swordmasters are not as good versus multiple opponents. It is a duelist discipline. Pure damage is considered light by some, but single-stroke damage isn't their calling card. They control the fight through their social and combat prowess. Have I said that enough? Fitting the theme of putting on a show, it is not the Swordmaster's job to win quickly, but rather the Swordmaster frustrates and whittles the opponent into submission. In Earthdawn, half magic represents discipline-pertinent knowledge and skills a character knows or can perform simply by being an adept of that discipline. In this case, the Swordmaster Adept can attempt to use half magic to care for his weapon, know the history of a legendary weapon, recognize different types of melee weapons, and even identify another Swordmaster's fighting technique, including which prominent Swordmasters may have shaped the individual's style. Based on the successful use of half magic, and solely at the GM's discretion, bonuses may be applied to other action tests, or subtle information may be provided to the player by the GM on the character's behalf. Perhaps after a half magic test, the asset on the weapon does not degenerate its quality as it does for another character. Or knowing that someone trained in style devised by Liliandra the Exciting has a habit of employing a hamstring attack, which may provide a one-step bonus to the avoid blow talent for the player character. These are personal rules I use, and I use sparingly, but they are there to represent the Swordmaster's knowledge of the discipline. Alright, now let's move on to discipline violations. With great power, well, come some rules. Remember from my overview video that disciplines are not character classes, professions, or archetypes. They are lifestyles, and while their personal vision of each adept may differ, there are some foundations that must remain. First, a Swordmaster of any variant must never attempt to win quickly or to win without flair. Remember, the Swordmaster lives for the spotlight and for glory. Even the Stickmaster, which I will discuss later, often considered by other Swordmasters to be overly mundane, serious, and boring, relish the spotlight and fanfare once engaged in the dance. A Swordmaster is almost always violating the discipline when not performing extraneous but interesting combat maneuvers during the game session. Now this can be a tricky one when considering one's personal vision, but to use the Stickmaster example again, true, that staff wielder may not swing from every chandelier. However, the interesting and memorable application of attacks that aren't simply, I swing, roll dice, do some damage, rinse, repeat, may suffice. I expect a little more from my Swordmaster player characters, but the concept will be something you can work out with your GM. Perhaps a low circle Stickmaster mercilessly, I can't say the word for some reason, we're going to try that again, and I'm not cutting that out, mercilessly attacks to knock down every round, frustrating the opponent by keeping him on his butt, while of course taunting him all the while. Interesting combat maneuvers don't have to be the use of specific unusual talents or skills, but can be the interesting and descriptive employment of common talents like melee weapon. Lastly, and I'll quote this from the Adept's Way, my absolute favorite first edition supplement book. And I quote, "A Swordmaster who sneaks up behind an unarmed opponent and silently slits his throat with a knife has committed a heinous violation and must complete a deed of atonement to end her talent crisis." A talent crisis is when you lose steps, lose action dice when trying to use your talents, effectively limiting or cutting you off from your discipline. So keep that in mind whenever you're role-playing a Swordmaster. Alright, so I talked about the Stickmaster. What the heck is that and where did it come from? Technically it came from 2nd edition Earthdawn. But in the Earthdawn game context, it's part of a personal vision, or as I like to call it, variations on a theme. Let me very quickly cover these variations on a theme as well as a couple of Swordmaster specialists, starting with the specialist. There are two Swordmaster specialists, the Gallant, who focuses on words and wit, and the Blade Master who focuses on weapon prowess. The Gallant uses Swordmaster talents to build romantic, dashing reputations, almost exclusively aiding members of the opposite sex. Charisma, personal image, and flirtatious wit, or amorous banter, are the Gallant's calling card. The Bladesman, on the other hand, communicates with the sword. Hour after hour, day after day, the Bladesman practices a dizzying array of acrobatic and swashbuckling skills, while only giving passing, necessary interest to the social component of the discipline. Now, moving on to other variations. While the discipline is called Swordmaster, and the majority of Swordmasters do wield a sword, Swordmaster Adepts are not limited to the sword. The weapon of choice is personal to the character, and there are those who have picked up the staff, the axe, the hammer, the flail, the club, the dagger, and so on. The aforementioned Stickmaster, for example, uses a wooden staff as his weapon of choice. Stickmasters are often seen as more serious than sword wielders, as mentioned before. They tend to be like the proverbial wandering monk who may look innocent and mundane, something that rankles many Swordmasters, but when it's time for action, the Stickmaster's wit and flourishes are no less impressive. They are swordmasters after all, so the spectacle and attention received are no less important to them than to their bladed cousins. In the Earthdawn sessions I GM, we have defined the Axemaster as a swordmaster who uses either one or two-handed axes as their weapon of choice. Where the traditional swordmaster is your swashbuckler of old, and the stick fighter tends to be your more Far Eastern monk, the Axemaster is your high-energy professional wrestler. Roar! Even to the point of eschewing armor and clothing to show off the heavy musculature required for its craft. When considered from afar, from the role-playing perspective of a character, the axe fighter seems and is often taken for nothing more than a brute. However, when seen up close, the power, beauty, and precision with both wit and blade amazes even the most traditional swordmaster. Instead of flourishes of subtle wit, the Axemaster hits with precise but heavy words and blade. The necessary strength and body control required for the dance with an axe is unbelievable if not seen. To prove the point, most tournaments show off the Axemaster's precision and accuracy over explosive damage. Axe fighters love to strike hard once, or in short forms, then pause to gloat, often turning their backs to the opponent as a sign of strength and prowess. Axe fighters are every much the showmen as their other swordmaster brethren, and will work a crowd similarly, whether the number of spectators is as small as their adventuring mates, or as large as the cheering masses of a filled coliseum. There are even hammer masters, club masters, flail masters, and most certainly masters of other weapon types as well, each with their own variations on the foundation of the swordmaster theme. Traditional bladed swordmasters may look down upon these other styles and may even refuse to train someone who does not wield the discipline's namesake weapon. But that does not make the dagger master any less lethal, any less the showman, or any less of a swordmaster. Alright, I'm not going to talk about multi-discipline combinations, their advantages and their effects, but I will mention that when taking on a second discipline, the swordmaster leans towards the troubadour and the illusionist. Both disciplines fuel the swordmaster's penchant for flair and showmanship, so they are natural expressions of the swordmaster's extroverted persona. On the other hand, the quieter disciplines of scout, thief, and, in my opinion, even the archer, are more of a struggle, but certainly not impossible for the swordmaster to dance with. In terms of the passions, the pseudo-gods of Earthdawn, most of the swordmasters in my campaigns have revered Thystonius, the passion of physical competition and valor. While in my mind, I've always felt that Floranus, the passion of revelry, victory, energy, and motion, to be appropriate. Neither choice is wrong, or even important, and a case could be made for any of the 12 passions. So don't limit yourself to anything other than your character's personal vision built upon the foundation of the swordmaster discipline. Ultimately, the swordmaster will be fun for the social or witty role player who also desires to be combat capable. On the other hand, the social aspect can put off quieter, less roleplay oriented characters or players. The swordmaster excels at controlling combat, which will be fun for certain types of players, while its overall damage output may underwhelm some other players. Okay, so the reason I started with the swordmaster is because while I personally prefer the nethermancer, the swordmaster is, in my opinion, the iconic discipline of the Earthdawn setting. I can't name a campaign as a player or as a game master in which I didn't have a swordmaster in the party. So I hope you enjoyed this first in what I hope to be a series that covers all of the primary disciplines in the Earthdawn setting. Please let me know what you think of this episode, the swordmaster discipline, and the Earthdawn setting as a whole. And if you have a discipline you really want me to cover sooner rather than later, please let me know so I can move it to the top of my list. Finally, if you like this video, please comment below and subscribe to the Legion Myth channel. It really helps us out more than you can know. If you have not already, please mash that subscribe button along with the bell icon so you can be notified when new videos are uploaded. And with that, I will see you next time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.